You're listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast. We talk with adventurers from around the globe to bring you the inspiration and motivation you need to get started in the outdoors or to keep you moving if you're already there. Now here's your host, Kurt Linville.
Hi friends, thank you for listening to the Adventure Sports Podcast today. I'm excited about this one. I know I start most episodes by saying I'm excited, but I am for a lot of reasons. This episode is with Louis Hall, who has done a lot of work raising money for various causes, and usually did so via extended horseback rides. And he did one across the southern part of Europe that was nearly 2,000 miles, took over 100 days. This was a couple of years back now, maybe 3 years ago, but I don't know how you can ride a horse across Europe these days, because I don't know where the trails are. So anyway, this is going to be fun. We've interviewed people that have ridden horses big distances in the U.S., but I didn't even know it was possible in Europe. And I love the connection between horse and rider and how that can help people with so many aspects of life. It's really surprising. So we're going to get into that as well. Louis, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much for having me, Kurt. Very happy to be here.
You've got a book about this called In Green that came out, I guess, in the spring or midsummer in the U.S. The subtitle is Two Horses, Two Strangers, A Journey to the End of the Land, which is a fun summary. It just, right away I want to read it. Wow, where do we start? Let's start with where you are right now. So where are we talking to you?
I'm in Scotland, which is where I'm from, and I'm here with the two horses that featured in the book In Green and also featured on that journey that you mentioned across Europe. In Scotland, and it's about to rain as usual, but it is home. So,
well, I've long wanted to visit Scotland, and I haven't made it yet, but it's on my list of places that I really want to go. And the horses, now I saw this online, but tell me if I get the pronunciation correct. The horses are Sasha and Istia. Did I get that correct?
That's right, Sasha and Istia, and they are originally from the north of Italy in the Apennine Mountains, where I bought Sasha, like you say, a couple of years back, to do this big journey across Europe. And later I was joined by a young woman called Kiki and her horse called Istia. And they met me later in near France in the kind of western Ligurian mountains. And the journey was fundamentally, I wanted to kind of make a story of my own. I saved up some money. I was living in London, working in the stables in Hyde Park and central London. And I wanted to I read a book called Don Quixote, which I'm sure you've heard of, many of your listeners will hopefully have heard of. And I got very inspired by this crazy old man. And so I wanted to do a journey of my own. And then, I saved up some cash, bought Sasha for actually pretty cheap in comparison to other yards and stuff. And then the journey was also for charity. So it was it was raising money for Ukrainian refugees and the trauma that they've experienced. And also and so Kiki found out about the journey and she joined because she herself wanted to raise money for a mental health cause. So we both were on the same page like that, but we didn't know each other. We met each other once, and other than that, we were strangers. So it was always going to be an interesting meeting. And I mean, people bond very quickly over horses, especially having to keep them alive, going over forgotten tracks in Europe.
Wow! So that is kind of the quick overview of what In Green is about, the book, right? Okay, well, let's go back a little bit further back than that. So you said you read Don Quixote and you decided to tilt at your own windmills, I guess. But
absolutely.
There was something about Mongolia here too. So let's take us all the way back to Mongolia and your experience there.
Yeah, that really was the start of my exposure to horses beyond animals that belong to a certain section of society, cooped up in a stables, just around in circles for eternity in an arena. That's what I had thought about. That's what I'd seen in the UK. And so horses had never really been a big part of what I thought I might do in my life or my future. And I finished school, and I'm not sure if you guys have it in the States, but after school, often you go on a gap year, which is basically just to go a bit wild for a year until you go to university.
I think that's a great idea, and not enough people do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly needed it, but it's also good just to go straight to university. However, I think some people need to kind of listen to some wild callings before they sit down again at the desk. So anyway, I did that, and I had heard about a book which is called The Horse Boy, an American book about a couple who have an autistic son, and they try everything to help him, and the problems are kind of tearing them apart as a couple. However, they end up going to Mongolia to seek help from a tribe called the Tsaatan tribe who live in the north of the Mongolia. And me and two friends, we read the book. We had some money working on a farm, and we thought, well, this is our gap year. Let's do something exciting. So we wanted to go and find this tribe for ourselves and see if they really existed, and just wanted a bit of an adventure. And whilst we were there, to get to the tribe, we needed to use ponies. So we actually ended up buying 4 Mongolian ponies. And that was the first time that I really saw these animals as, yeah, as something that's part of, or at least on the same level as human existence, which I'd never really seen before. Before I'd seen them as like things for recreation or for entertainment, but they're actually a living element of the culture of the Mongolian people, where we were, at least in the north. And that completely transformed my understanding of them. And we used them to, travel for almost a month. And the Tsaatan tribe were using them to live with, and they were an integral part of their transport and their lives. And so that was very inspiring, because I suddenly saw horses as something much deeper than just a thing for fun. They were actually part of your existence. And I brought that stayed inside, that inspired me. And I then got my job at this stables in Hyde Park after 3 years of university, and then everything kind of the domino effect from there, Don Quixote, and then eventually this ride across Europe after a few ones in the UK.
Well, Louis, I want to state the obvious here, but just in way of reminding all of us, there was a symbiosis between humans and horses that went back for thousands of years. And before
Yeah,
automobiles and trains and planes, horses were the way that everyone got around. And it
yeah,
wasn't
absolutely.
just a matter of, oh, I can ride on horseback. Horses fought in battles. Horses, changed history. And they were greatly prized for all of their contributions to humanity. And it might even be easy to start thinking of them very utilitarian, in a utilitarian way, for the way that, horses were used back then. But I think what's so fascinating is, even then, people formed deep bonds with horses, and horses with people as well. And I kind of feel like, the epigenetics go back for thousands of years, the bond between horses and humans. And there's something so special about that, so unique. It just kind of impresses me every time I'm in the presence of a horse. I
Definitely.
feel I feel like there's something big going on there.
No, no, you're right. I mean, they're intertwined for 5,500 years. They are mankind's most loyal, oldest companion that we've had.
Yes.
The horse history directly shapes human history, and they literally led us step by step up into the Industrial Revolution in the early 20th century. And the world today would look a very different place if it weren't for horses. And that's probably an understatement. But the fact that you go from Industrial Revolution, in early 1900s, everyone, or at least every family would have at least a horse, or would know someone with a horse that they can use, at least that's certainly outside of cities. And then you go from that situation to post First and Second World War, no one has horses, or at least a very, very small fraction of the population have horses. And if they do, they're much more inclined to have them for recreation other than utilitarian uses. And the whole dynamic is completely transformed, to the extent where you're in a situation in the UK in particular, where people are so alien to horses and what and their history, that they have become this kind of object just for a certain bit of society, which is so backward to where we were 100 years ago. And it's that fast and it's that quick, the change that I find really shocking. Because, like you say, horses, for me, they're kind of catalysts and magnets for attracting people from all walks of life, because I really think there is something that we connect with that is shaped by this shared history we have. And it's something that you have to kind of just be still and wait and wait for it to feel that connection. But it's there. But again, if you keep a horse cooped up in a stable and if you treat them like a prized object, you won't find that connection because you're numbing it. If you allow a horse to be itself, and if you lean towards this animal that is essentially wanting to gain your trust, then something very, very historic, ancient, and primal, I think, it can be forged between the two animals, as it has been 5,500 years. And it's no secret why they are so good as being healers for our poor mental health, or for PTSD, or for autism, or lots of neurological divergencies. They're extraordinary animals. And what is sad is that we are only, at the moment, in many cultures in the West, we only just touch the surface of what they really can achieve and can do for us. Whereas cultures like Mongolia, or some parts of Southern Europe and slightly more far-flung places, they still have that connection with the horse because they haven't modernized so quickly. And lucky them, because I certainly have to seek it out and really, really try and keep that connection alive in these slightly unusual, unconventional journeys. And most people think I'm an idiot, but or at least it's not reality. However, it's something that's very real in the shaping of us as human beings.
Oh, absolutely. I have a couple anecdotes to share because I would like your opinion on them. Here's the first one, real simple. In our neighborhood, I like to take walks, and in our neighborhood, there's a neighbor down the way who has a small pasture and boards a horse in the wintertime for someone else. And so the horse often watches me walk by. And one day I walked up to the horse and it came to me, right? And I'm kind of rubbing its nose and I said, "What's your name?" And Candor popped into my mind. I don't know why. I said, "Oh, your name is Candor." And from that day forward, if I said Candor, the horse would come. The horse's name wasn't actually Candor. Someone else named the horse, but that became a connection between the two of us, right?
Yeah.
To me, the horse was Candor. And if I said Candor, the horse knew it was me. I was like, there's something special about that. So simple, but what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, well, you've broken that wall. You've basically horses mirror our emotions. If you're going there trusting this animal, or at least wanting to make a connection and give it a name, then it's gonna, all it's thinking itself is this here is a potential friend. Here is
Wow.
a human that can be on the same level. However, if you went in and you were afraid, tense, then the horse would also be like that as well in most cases. So it's if it's candor for you, then it's candor for the horse as well. It's that's what you guys have together. So it just goes to show.
Well, here's an anecdote that I actually got from, there are some equine therapy programs in the US, and I'm sure you've heard of them, but where people work with horses to try to improve their situation. There was one story that came from one of these programs that was just mind-blowing to me. There was a lady that decided to work with a horse. I don't know what her specific struggles were, but she had injuries on her arms, and she was wearing long sleeves that hid all the injuries. But there was a horse there that had been caught up in a fence or something and had injuries on its front legs. In a lot of these therapies, the horse kind of chooses the patient, so to speak. And so the horse came to her immediately and started nuzzling and pushing on her sleeves so that she would push her sleeves up to expose her injuries, because the horse had the same injuries. The horse knew, even though she had long sleeves on.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I mean, there's some incredible programs that you guys have in the States for bettering, yeah, as you say, the situations. But it's a lovely story. We do a thing with the charity that has kind of been born out of these journeys that I do in the UK, and I now do it with Kiki. The charity is called the Big Hoof, and one of the things that we've started doing is collaborating with a local group who, they're basically individuals from the inner city areas who don't have much access to the outdoors, and certainly no access to kind of gardens or farms or horses. And the horses here, they live on a small farm, and so they come out in a minibus and they spend half a day with the horses in the garden. And there's this one guy I remember last summer, and he hadn't started a conversation. He had never started a conversation with his carer. It was always his carer asking him, "Are you okay? What do you need?" etc. And this guy was 21 and he had a carer since he was 16, as well as having parents. He had a carer as well because he was, yeah, not in a good place and needs to be looked after 24/7, essentially. And this horse that is here, Istia, who joined my ride across Europe in the Ligurian Alps, she is a mare, which obviously, well, not obviously, but they tend to be a lot more sensitive than geldings, at least, and stallions. And we were in the garden, and this guy was minding his own business, just standing alone, not speaking. And she walked up to him and nudged his back, and he got a bit of a fright and turned around and said, "Well, what's this?" And he had never touched a horse, never been around a horse in his life. And his carer was kind of worried that he'd get scared. However, he immediately put out his hand and touched her nose, her head, her kind of forehead. And if a horse is kind of subservient to you, it's quite a good test. They'll bow or at least not push up. If you put your hand against their head, they'll kind of tend to go down if they trust you and are subservient to you. And Istia, the mare, she immediately put her head down and he started stroking her. And you literally couldn't separate them for the next like 4 hours. And it was just such a dream to watch. However, they went back in the minibus, and as soon as they got back in the minibus, the first thing he said to his carer was, "When can we go back?" And the whole journey, he was talking to her about how he felt and this experience he had with the horse. However, also just stuff about his childhood, which he'd never opened up about. And sure enough, he came back. Darren, his name is, and he came back the next session we did, which was about 4 weeks later, and he's coming back in 2 weeks' time. But it was just a very first-hand experience of, this very old and real pure connection. A horse kind of seeing through things that we, put up as walls. And it was similar to the horse coming up to the lady with the sore arm. It's just, they kind of have this sixth sense, I feel sometimes, at least a sense that sees right through you. And that can be extremely disarming, quite scary, but at the end of the day, very healing. If you allow it. And this was such a pleasure to watch.
I love those stories.
Yeah.
I think we've built a case for the human horse connection here. and that there's more to your adventures than just jumping on an animal and forcing it across a continent. Right?
I hope so. Yeah. For sure.
And so I wanted to kind of couch our discussion in that because it's such a unique and special relationship. Let's go to your trip across Europe on Sasha. Where did you start?
So I started in a small town near Siena in Italy, so Tuscany. And we started at the end of, when was it, start or the end? It was in March, so it wasn't the most intelligent time to be going across the Alps, but I hadn't really thought that far ahead. I just wanted to avoid getting into Western Europe before it got really hot and sunny. That was my thought. That's why I started so early. But anyway, we set off from a small town near Siena.
You went all the way from there to Spain, and I have a name here, Cape Finisterre. Did I get it close?
Cape Finisterre,
Finisterre. Okay. So this is nearly 2,000 miles. I didn't know that was possible in Europe. What route did you use? How did you make the connections? Hey friends, here at the Adventure Sports Podcast, health is really a priority. That's part of the reason why for over 10 years we've been encouraging people to get out there and have some fun, because when we become more active, it makes us healthier. Our focus on health is one of the reasons that I'm excited about today's sponsor, True Diagnostic. Did you know that your calendar age doesn't always match how old your body truly is? Your biological age, the age of your cells and organs, is actually the number one predictor of your risk for serious diseases like heart disease, cancer, dementia, and more. That's why learning your biological age can be truly life-changing, and that's exactly what the True Age test from True Diagnostic helps you do. It's a simple at-home test. You just prick your finger and then use the provided packaging and a prepaid envelope to send the sample in for testing. No doctor's visits required, no labs, but you'll get great information that can help you to be healthier and understand how you're doing with your own health habits. Now, I always joke that I'm 23 years old. You've heard me say that forever. Obviously, I'm quite a bit older than that, but I'm curious to find out what my biological age is. It's kind of eye-opening when you learn that your biological age, if it's just 5 years older than your actual age, your risk for major diseases can go up by 30 to 50%. That's kind of a wake-up call. But due to epigenetics, and this is the part that really inspires me, up to 90% of biological aging is driven by lifestyle. That means the way that we eat, move, sleep, manage stress, all these things play massive roles in how fast or slow our bodies age. That aligns with the Adventure Sports podcast so much. So I'm taking the test. I'm excited to find out the results. And in addition to my biological age, True Diagnostic also provides a personalized report that's full of science-backed steps that we can all take to slow down aging and improve our health over time. If you care about protecting your health and want to find out what your real age is, head over to truediagnostic.com and use my code ASP to get 20% off your entire order or subscription. That's truediagnostic.com. Use ASP at checkout to get 20% off. Your future self will thank you.
Yeah, good question. That was the fun part and the difficult part. I knew that Europe was a good one for kind of reliable routes with people that can help because of the pilgrimages, because of the kind of the historic religious pilgrimages that are scattered all over Europe. Some of them dating back to the 9th, 10th century, some even before. So I done the Camino de Santiago de Compostela, which is a route that I'm sure some of your listeners will know, which finishes in Santiago de Compostela, which is in the west, which is in western Spain, and it starts from south of France. However, it could also start from. There's routes that go all the way from Moscow. There's routes that go from Rome.
Oh, wow.
There's routes that go from Canterbury in England. So, and it's this very, very famous route that kind of spiderwebs itself to the Atlantic Ocean. So I knew that at some point I was going to be on that route. And that route is essentially, it's meant to be a beautiful track that doesn't go along motorways and doesn't go through major cities and stays into the more historic towns and nice kind of paths. That's the idea. It's not always the case, but it's mostly the case. And it's a great walking route and I recommend to anyone. But that was only a section of it. I was obviously starting in Italy, so I had to get myself from Italy to France first. I knew of a route called the Via Francigena, which is an old pilgrimage trail that goes from Canterbury in the south of England to Rome. So I knew that if I just followed that until the Alps, then that would be okay. The Alps themselves were definitely the most difficult because Napoleon went across the Alps from kind of north to southeast using a route that went over the St. Bernard Pass. So that was kind of too far north for me. Hannibal went, as I'm sure people know, with 37 elephants from west to east, again, too far north. So there wasn't really a very conclusive route for horses at all. This was also 2 years... No, was it? It was 2022, so it was just after COVID. At least
Right.
it was after. It was when restrictions were definitely no longer in place as much. But the Alps have been untouched, and so the routes, any established walking routes, hadn't been looked after. So trees had fallen, mudslides, avalanches, that kind of thing had kind of reshaped a lot of these walking trails. However, I reached the foothills of the Alps after 3 weeks going up Tuscany, or 2 weeks, I think. And then I contacted two women who were local to the area, who were really experienced hikers and had horse experience. And they basically said, right, as friends, we've wanted to create a conclusive horse trail across the Ligurian Alps since we've been children. We haven't done it because of this and that, work and children, etc. Would you be happy to be our guinea pig? And I said, yeah, I'd love to be your guinea pig as long as you get me to France. So we sat in one of the women's houses for about 5 days with the snow coming down and planned this route that would get across the Alps.
That's fantastic.
It was great fun, and using old partisan trails, local knowledge, hiking routes, just a combination of that, and calling up their friends and looking at old maps and stuff. It was really fun. And yeah, they gave me this route, and then they were like, yeah, on you go. Let's hope for the best. And it worked out to be actually a really great route. Definitely difficult at some parts, and I had to adjust with Sasha, but it got me to France after 2.5 weeks. And yeah, we created the first conclusive horse trail across the Ligurian Alps in history, or at least Sasha
Wonderful.
did. Yeah, which was a really unforeseen achievement. I mean, I was just concentrated on not getting chased by wolves and, not falling off the mountain. But that was a nice highlight. And then after that, we were in the French Alps, the Maritime Alps, which were, at least we had sun and it was warm and things changed a bit. And then to be honest, the routes themselves, I just wasn't so fussed, because after the Alps, I kind of felt that Sasha and I could do anything. And that was a very bonding 2.5 weeks going over those mountains. And so after that, to be honest, it wasn't so difficult to route our way west. And we, yeah, used a mixture of hiking routes and old tracks and the Camino Santiago de Compostela. And mostly, yeah, we stayed away from motorways, and well, all the time we stayed away from motorways, but mostly it was kind of not on the beaten track, which was great. But it always went through nice old villages and medieval towns and whatnot. And so yeah, it was actually a really lovely route, and it was a lot of fun making that and kind of working out where to go. So yeah, so you can ride in Europe and you can ride across. It won't be as wild and out in the sticks as I'm sure it is in some parts of the States, for sure. However, you are going on tracks that have been ridden on and walked on for hundreds and hundreds of years, and that was really cool. You're reliving history a lot of the time. That was a very cool element of it.
Mm. I don't know where to start. I have so many more questions. First, I guess, how long had you and Sasha been working together before you started this trip?
5 days.
So this was a new horse to
This is a
you.
very, very new horse. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So how did you end up with Sasha? How did that happen?
Yeah, I was working in these stables in London, and then I left the stables saved up some money, and went to work for a guy down in Naples in the south of Italy who had some horses. My job was to ride and sort of tame his stallions, or at least, hold on and not be chucked off.
Get them used to the idea.
Yeah, and then the idea was that, okay, I do that for 3 months, and in return, he'll lend me one of his geldings to do my journey. The guy was not true to his word, and I spent 3 months just working for free, and then eventually got in a hire car and just kind of went around as many stables as I could in Italy. However, this young woman called Kiki, who had contacted me before, said, by the way, still thinking of joining your journey, and I've just got myself a horse from the north of Italy. And at the time, I was like, yeah, well, I'll see you on my journey if you're really going to come. In my heart, I didn't really think she would, because lots of people said they'd join. However, when I was kind of really had been shafted by the Neapolitan, I was like, yeah, okay, where is that stables that you got your horse from? Because I really need the hand now. So I drove up, found Sasha, and then it was so late in the day. So yeah, 5 days later, we started.
Wow. So was Sasha well trained already? Did you have to teach Sasha how to do this trek? I
Well,
mean,
yeah, good question. I went to the owner, and she had heard about this journey, obviously through Kiki. And the owner was like, yeah, I've heard this. Yeah, this other woman, she wants to join. She bought a horse. And I said, yeah, I just need something that's, strong and is going to keep going. And she, pointed to Sasha, and she said, yeah, this is a strong horse. And I think he'll keep going. And I jumped on him, and we did I tried to do a circle with him in an arena, and he couldn't even do a circle. And then he was also kind of really badly behaved, but we went for a canter, and he just flew, and he was quite hard to stop. And I was like, you know what, if he can go in a straight line and doesn't want to stop, then that's kind of ideal. So
how old was Sasha at this time?
Sasha was 5 or 6, yeah. So certainly in a really good, just old enough to do this kind of thing, and
Right.
and he was strong for sure, and is really strong. So that wasn't an issue, but yeah, like you say, I didn't know him, and you can't really train a horse to do this. To be honest, yeah, obviously you have your great breeds, to do that kind of thing, like Connemara or Mustang, or the kind of native horses to the Pyrenees, like the Bretons, or yeah, Lusitanos. There's so many breeds that are really suited to this kind of trekking, and they need strong backs, that kind of thing. Arabs, which is what Sasha is, they're not technically ideal for this at all, but he had a lot of spirits, and we learned together. We did learn together, and he now has a set of skills that no horse really has unless they do that kind of journey. And he got better every day. Of course, at first he was like a rabbit caught in the headlights, and
Hmm.
like so was I. And we learnt together and just grew together. And definitely by the time we'd finished the Alps, we were a pretty strong duo, and we felt that we could face a lot. So yeah, there was no training, but we trained on the way and we took it slow and just kept on learning.
I've interviewed so many people that have done a long trek of some sort, but not with a horse. They've done it. They've done bicycle rides. They've walked forever. But the added benefit and challenge of taking an animal with you that's that big that you also have to get through mountain passes, snow drifts. I mean, to me, it sounds like I don't know where you would begin.
Mm.
I know you get on the horse and you go, or you walk in front of the horse and you go, or whatever the terrain requires. But did Sasha, I guess, start to cooperate right away, or was there a battle there?
I think no, there was a battle for a while, or at least there was a gaining of, the horses. You can't just demand respect.
Right.
They're not idiots, and you have to earn it, and you have to earn their trust. However, to do that, you have to respect and trust yourself, first and foremost, or at least pretend to. And I didn't at the start because I was just as scared as he was. So as I got more used to what we were doing, it's every day is just like it's absolutely wild. Every day you're with a horse, crossing roads, going through villages, stopping at bakeries, asking for directions in languages you don't really know, asking permissions, crossing through gates, avoiding bulls and cows, and and getting laughed at or getting helped. Every single second, there's something else that's happening, and to be honest, that takes about half a day to get used to because you have no choice.
Right.
But it is a whole different thing to traveling by foot or with a bicycle or like with a car or something. It is incomparable, to be honest. And yes, it has its obvious benefits, which I would say, with you're with a living animal, and it's that wonderful ancient bond you're recreating, and on these ancient trails which were made for horse riding. And however, it's also, the challenges are massive because it's not your feet and legs and body that you really are concerned about. Or I was constantly concerned about making sure that horse has food tonight, making sure Sasha has something to drink, making sure he's not hurting, making sure his back is okay. Every moment is about his well-being, and that, in a way, it's extremely exhausting because you're just constantly preoccupied with this other being. However, inadvertently, it does, I would suggest, make you go further, because if you take your mind away from yourself and stop worrying about yourself and you're constantly preoccupied with something else, then I think you go further. And when we were doing the Ligurian Alps, for example, we almost in 3 weeks, by the end of it, we averaged 20 miles a day with an ascent of 1,600 meters. And there was no way in hell I'd be able to do that, just me. But because I wasn't thinking about me, wasn't thinking about my own pains, or at least they were just being numbed because my mind was focused on Sasha, then I think we got that distance and that average because he was my own concern. We had to keep going. Also, I should have said, through the Alps, I was on foot. I wasn't riding him at all because it was just too dangerous and too taxing for his energy. If I rode him, I needed to keep him fit and strong for the rest of the journey. So I was carrying a lot of stuff on my back and walking with him. And yeah, there's no way I could have done that if I was on my own. However, there's a strange thing that happens when you're with a horse in particular, and you can go further, and you become this kind of, I talk about it in the book, you become this animal of two hearts and six legs. It's like a companion machine. And yes, there's challenges, and yes, there's benefits, but at the same time, you become one thing eventually. And I think that's a stronger thing. And it certainly leads you to more interesting people and places because you're with a horse. And it leads you further in many ways because the limits are not in yourself anymore, really. The limits are just how far and how well can you look after this horse and how much does it trust you. So the whole shape and feeling of making a journey completely alters with a horse. It is incomparable, I'd say, but it takes a lot of getting used to. And if the good doesn't outweigh the bad, then it can be such a pain and can be really difficult. But it's just taking it slow, and like we did, and we got extremely lucky many occasions as well. So there's a lot of that, and there's a huge amount of kindness of strangers. But again, those things, that kindness of strangers, those wonderful life affirming moments would not have happened without being with a horse.
I'm just kind of soaking all of that up. I'm trying to imagine what it would be like to be with a horse coming into a village where you know no one, and you have needs. you know,
Yeah.
I mean, Sasha needs food, Sasha needs water, you need the same. So did people say, "Hey, I've got a pasture here. Let Sasha just go graze," or "We have hay in the barn," or how did they? I can't imagine how did all that happen.
Yes. So there's a combination of things. My younger sister, Mariella, she was at art college at the time, and she was on a holiday. She came out to help with the journey, and so she had a car, was kind of going to places like 2 days before me and saying, by the way, there's a guy coming your way, or he hopefully will come your way with a horse. Do you know of anyone who can offer a stable or a field? And then she sent me a text saying, okay, there's some options here. I'll see you in 5 days time on a rest day. I take a rest day once a week on a Sunday. Well, hopefully it's a Sunday, but sometimes it wasn't. And so I kind of had an idea of where there was going to be issues and where there weren't going to be issues. But places like the Ligurian Alps, we had to plan that, me and those two women, quite meticulously to make sure we weren't going to be stranded in a storm, in a snowstorm or
Right.
something. However, with these rural communities, sometimes you just be staying with someone and they'd be like, okay, well, stay with my cousin down the road, and my other cousin's down that way, and you get passed on like a kind of unwanted parcel. And that was a lovely thing, seeing a horse make this kind of river connection between different communities or different members of family and friends. And the world became wonderfully small at that point. And then sometimes, yeah, we were completely out of luck, and I just had to knock on a few doors. But a lot of the time people came to Sasha and then to me. They'd come up to Sasha and say, oh, my friend or the local farmer, he's got a field. Is that what you need? And in a way, it was great because I wouldn't have to ask for anything myself. They'd be thinking about Sasha, right? This is a horse. He obviously needs water, grass, maybe some straw in a barn, if it's raining or whatnot. And then they turn to me and say, "Oh yeah, you're probably what do you want?" And I'm like, "Well, if you've got any food, that'd be amazing." And they were way more generous to me because I think I was with a horse,
Wow.
which was great. So I kind of, I managed to meet a lot of really, really lovely people because they were so happy to host the horse. It skipped a lot of conversations, do you know what I mean? It skipped a lot of
Sure. Yeah.
story because you just needed to look after the horse first and foremost. After that, okay, well, do you want to come and pitch a tent there, or you can sleep in the stable, or here's a bed inside, here's some food, or here's some wine, and 9 times out of 10 they were really, really generous. So it was he was on that level, on that front, he was a massive benefit having Sasha.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm going to paraphrase this in a way that you didn't, but you said often I didn't have to ask because they came to Sasha, and I kind of like, yeah, Sasha was doing the asking. That's
Yeah,
that's what's
very
going on here.
felt like that. It really felt like that, especially in languages you can't speak. The horse being that universal creature that almost every culture in the world had a history with.
Right.
The horse is that thing that you can just go from Mongolia to India to south of Spain or the Americas, wherever, and it's an animal that we all understand. It's a bit like music. It's a language that doesn't need any further explanation, and that's a huge benefit of traveling with it. People never didn't see me as a white British guy. They saw a horse and saw me as a traveler with a horse, and it was a revelation to me, really, how this animal just cuts through predispositions, prejudices, and class or anything that people might attach to someone if they meet them. It was a great way to travel because you get invited to a country or culture from the bottom up, and you're right in it, as opposed to being a tourist with a kind of sticker on your head saying from the UK, from wherever.
Right.
You're not. Suddenly you're a guy with a horse, and it really opens things up. I would say to being right in there in a culture, which is why writing, I feel, goes very hand in hand with it because you have access to incredible stories that you wouldn't really have access to otherwise.
Oh yeah. I've talked to several people who've traveled by bicycle around the world, and they say how much more they're in it, like you said, so much more accessible to people because they're on a bicycle instead of, inside of a couple of tons of glass and steel. But the bicycle doesn't have needs, and it doesn't
Mm.
have thousands of years of history and the epigenetic bond that we mentioned before. So I can see how the horse, people would have compassion for the horse. They're not going to have compassion for the bicycle. So it just adds another element of human realness, I think. you
Hmm.
know? I'm speculating, obviously, because I have not ridden a horse across Europe, but I
Yeah.
can see the beauty of the adventure. So, Louis, why? Why did you do it?
Why? Yeah, that was the question I had to tackle when the publisher approached me saying, "Would you like to write a book about this journey you did?" And I started writing it, and then it got to, I'd finished the first manuscripts, and the bottom line was that I couldn't work out exactly why I did it. And every kind of travel book, you kind of need a bit of a why, or at least every bit of nonfiction, there has to be a kind of something that you hang the story on. But it was a combination of things. I think I was, how old was I at the time? 27, so quite 26 actually. No, 20, maybe 25, 25 or 26. And yeah, pretty restless in life. I was working as an actor in London and at these stables, and I really wanted to create a story of my own. I wanted to establish myself, to others, to my family. Yeah, just kind of feel 2 feet on the ground and say, this is who I am. Yeah, horses had been something that I'd definitely stayed in contact with since Mongolia. They were a bit of a release and escape for me.
Mm.
I felt very in the present around them, and I'm not someone who feels easily in the present. I'm quite slightly all over the place and disorganized, and always thinking about the next thing. And however, with horses, I felt very steady, very calm, and they maintained an attraction for me throughout a quite turbulent university time. And I really think it was that book, Don Quixote, that did a lot to me. I was living in a tiny studio flat in London, working at these stables and not getting roles as an actor. And I read this book, which just inflamed my imagination.
Mm.
And I thought, God, I need to do this. I need to do this. I need to do a journey anywhere. Just find me a horse, find me a journey, and something will happen. Something good will happen. I just know it. And that was a very strong feeling. Before this journey, I had done quite a few journeys in the UK with a horse. The first one was just after lockdown in 2020, just after COVID in 2020, when I rode a Highland pony down the length of the UK in memory of a friend of mine and of many called Leo, who died of cystic fibrosis. And that journey was 57 days, 1,200 miles down the UK, top to bottom. And that really was an incredible example of people from all walks of life coming out and being connected by this pony, having been locked up in their homes, and every stranger is a
Oh,
potential
sure.
stranger. And it was a wonderful way to kind of, and I saw a fantastic side of humanity there. And that really, and it raised quite a lot of money for the Cystic Fibrosis Trust. And I thought, God, there's something in this. There's something in this horse travel thing where you just bring people together, make a little community, yet connect people to each other and to the past, and however make something new. And it was all wrapped up, and I couldn't quite figure out why it was so special. But it was just ticking all these boxes. And then I did a few more for charity in the UK, and then I thought, okay, I just want to do something even bigger. And then obviously Don Quixote came along, and things, one thing led to another, really.
Wow. Well, tell us about the Big Hoof. Speaking of charities.
Yeah, so that came about because of that journey down the UK. It was a knee-jerk reaction, I think, to COVID. I just felt very frustrated about our freedom being, yeah, our freedom being hindered, and I was really actually scared that people just wouldn't do adventures anymore, or wouldn't try and connect with the kind of unknown, or this kind of romantic sense of just going and seeing what happens. I was really terrified that was actually the world was going to change forever, which it did, but in not in as severe way as I thought it was. So, combination of that, and I also started speaking to Leo's parents, who was a family friend at the time, because lots of people who were suffering from degenerative illnesses like cystic fibrosis weren't even allowed to leave their homes, and I felt really all these kind of emotions were going through, and I also felt very grateful that I didn't have an illness like this, and could do something, and I just wanted to do something, and so yeah, so eventually thought of doing a ride down the UK. And that journey, I called it the Big Hoof, and just because it needed a fundraising page and name or something, and raised a lot of money. And then I thought, okay, well, let's do this one again. So I did a little one down south of the UK for Afghan women and children, and then the one across Europe. And since then, we've done almost 9 journeys across old trails and historic routes in the UK, mainly for mental health causes. So it's for suicide prevention, and for people suffering from addiction and homelessness or abuse, isolation. And we have to date, yeah, raised almost £100,000, and have done 9 rides now. And yeah, it's a wonderful, growing, slightly disorganized part of my life which I absolutely adore, and it's an established charity, and we can help a lot of other causes in the process. As you can imagine, being a charity, we can kind of pick what we want to raise money for. So that's a really fun part of it. We raise money for causes that are really important to the local communities we're journeying over. We usually have about 10 to 15 participants per journey, and the journeys are usually 5 to 2 weeks long. 5 days, sorry, to 2 weeks long. And yeah, we raise around the 3,400, £4,000 for whatever cause we're raising money for. And these people who come on the journey, 80% of them won't have any horse experience. And you don't need any horse experience. What we have is Sasha and Istia, the two horses that went across Europe, who are now in Scotland. They are kind of the nucleus of the Big Hoof. And we just walk with them. If you want to ride them, you jump on. If you don't have to. We camp, we swim in lochs, we light fires, we visit local pubs, we ride into villages, make a scene, raise some money, get into newspapers, have a really good time. However, bring these strangers, usually all strangers, together, unite them with the cause of raising money, but also with a kind of a part of living of human existence that is slowly becoming harder to reach, which is the kindness of strangers, serendipity, just believing in the unknown, just going for it, and being, as we've been speaking about, alongside this incredible animal the whole way. And it's a wonderful, I love it very much because it allows me to be in the present, but also it has a kind of a life force of its own and creates a real community. And by proxy with horses, it is a mental health charity. So a lot of people come with real issues, and the feedback we get is really inspiring. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how it grows, how it continues to grow.
That's impressive. And I'm touched. Where would you be without having done these things with horses?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I left London after that journey down the UK, and then came back and had a year, read Don Quixote, then went on the one across Europe and never returned to London, really. I think if horses hadn't impacted me in the way they did, and if I hadn't decided to start journeying with them, I think my life would be, have taken a very different role. It would have been one that I think I would probably still be working as an actor and wouldn't know the half of what the world can offer. And I'd probably still be in London, and it'd be a very different story. A very different story, and one that, wouldn't know the wonder of what the horses have brought me. I feel extremely lucky to have been, to have had that experience with them. If it weren't for that, then the story would have been very different. And through the story, through horses, I've met my fiance. I've written a book. I've pursued a dream of writing that I always had, but never thought I was capable of doing. And I started the charity, the Big Hoof, which is the biggest pride of my life, really. And none of that would have occurred. Yeah, and I wouldn't know Sasha.
So, Louis, I wrote a book
Mm.
that came out last fall. And I'm bringing it up for this reason. The assertion in one of the chapters is that when people ask what the meaning of life is, they're asking the wrong question. The right question is, what gives your life meaning?
Mm.
And then the book encourages people to find something that they feel strongly about, that they love, that they value, that, toots their whistle, so to speak, and then to pour themselves into it in a way that makes a difference for others. Because that's what gives life meaning, I think. And your story is the perfect example of that. It's such a beautiful story about how you poured yourself into the thing that you found meaningful and valuable, and you're making a huge impact in the world for others. And if you had only just had a beautiful impact for yourself, that would still be a beautiful story. But the fact that you've raised so much money for such worthy causes, and you're bringing people together, strangers who are becoming friends, and encounters with strangers in the towns, and the kindness that people have, and that what it means to be human, and you're doing it through horses. I'm blown away. It's so cool. It's a beautiful story.
Well, I certainly feel and have felt, I think, from the very beginning that I'm in a position where I can do that. I've had a nice upbringing with lovely parents and strong siblings that are very supportive of each other. And it was definitely something drilled into us when we were younger that, it's a lot of life is about finding as you say, meaning through helping others, and that was a sort of second nature in a way. Yeah, how can it be turned into something that will impact other people because that will benefit me, in an emotional way, and it will give it meaning. Like you say, there's some way wilder, more impressive stories by individuals doing it for themselves, and hats off to them, incredible stuff. But for me, I really don't think any of it would matter. None of this would matter if it was a solo venture. It wouldn't have any meaning for me in the same way.
Mm.
And yeah, the horse is my tool into that. The horse allows me to do that. It brings people together. I don't think that I would have at all been able to do anything like it if it weren't for the horse. Do you know what I mean? I'm not very good at bringing people together in the sense of like it's hard to describe, but I needed the horse to be my back. I needed the horse to be my partner to allow me to do things that I really wanted to do. And I didn't know it, but that is exactly what's happened.
So I'm going to touch a couple of bases here, and then I have one last question for you. But the book is in green, and it's Two Horses, Two Strangers, A Journey to the End of the Land. Where can people get that?
So that is available on Amazon and some stores in the US. I don't know how many, because it just came out in July. But it's available on Amazon, and it's on audiobook and Kindle as well.
Okay, that's cool. And how can people learn more about the Big Hoof?
Yeah, so we have a website, thebighoof.com, and we have a social Instagram page, The Big Hoof. So we also, if you want to sign up to our newsletter, we give them quarterly, and people are very, very welcome to join, if they're on this side of the pond, to join any journeys that we've got. And very open to, as I say, people who do not have any experience with horses whatsoever. In fact, that's sometimes even better. And who just feel like a break, or feel like a walk, or feel like a bit of fun, or feel like they need to access a part of their life that they haven't been able to do, stuck in an office or stuck in a routine. And it's a real kind of shake up. And you obviously get to see some beautiful parts of the UK, very old, and meet some wonderful eccentric characters and the fellow participants who are all as interesting as each other with their own backstories. So yeah, please, if you're ever here, join. And if not, follow us on social media or on our website.
You're making me want to jump a plane to get across the pond and do this. I really need to see more of your country, but to do it in that manner sounds so good. So good. So that's the Big Hoof. And is it just thebighoof.com?
Yeah, thebighoof.com. Yeah.
Okay. And anything else you want to share before the last question?
I don't think so. No, I think, yeah, Kurt, we've covered it. We've covered everything.
Good. Well, here's the big question then. Who is Sasha to you now?
Well, yeah, who is Sasha to me now? When I first met him, he was like a child. I don't have any children yet, but I think it's the closest thing I've ever had to having a son was on that journey. And then when he finished the journey, he became like a brother. And now he's something I really miss when I'm not in Scotland. He's something that I think about when I think about when I'm unhappy and I want things to go better, and I'm not feeling inspired, and I'm not feeling enthusiastic about life. And he's this steady, unchanging rock that reminds me of how simple and pure and possible life can be. As soon as I jump on Sasha and go for a ride, literally the world just opens up. Whatever was clamping me down just lifts and everything erupts again. And it's like we're back in the middle of the Alps or along some canal in the south of France. And it happens every single time. So now Sasha is, I guess he's blood. He really is as close as I can get to the embodiment of all the things that I find important about life. And he makes me a better person.
I can't think of a better way to wrap it up. Thank you, Louis, for sharing that with us. That's beautiful. And for, all the Adventure Sports podcast family out there, wow, how inspiring, how cool. Find your thing, get out there and have some fun.